I'm Yuksen, and I welcome you to another short vox from Warhammer 40k's Grim History from the Beyond. This month I'm discussing the Crimson Fists. Now last week I discussed the 29th and current chapter master of the Crimson Fists, Pedro Cantor. This time I shall be discussing the first chapter master of the Crimson Fists, Alexis Polux. But before we talk about this great hero, I'd like to remind everyone who enjoys these voxes to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you really want to go the extra mile, become a member. Now, let's discuss Alexis Polux, the Imperial Fist who was given the honor of being the chapter master of the Crimson Fists. He is most noted by many scholars for his great size. Some even claim, while wearing power armor, he was at eye level with Robute Gilman. However unlikely that is, he was deemed taller than his battle brothers, and even without his power armor, he dwarfed most other Astartes. Such was Pollux's strength and focus so well, even for one of the Legion Astartes, that he was able to deliver a single crushing blow with his power fist as easily as one of his brothers might have swung a sword. But his size was not his only aspect that set him apart from most. After all, just being big won't make you one of the Stone Men, also known as Rogel Dorn's informal advisory council. Alexis Polux was a highly skilled commander and a formidable tactician, particularly in the fields of Voidborn combat and Zone Mortalis, aka Fatal Ground, in High Gothic. Polux's rise through the ranks of the Imperial Fists was meteoric, as his superlative combat and potent tactical skills saw him raised to command other Space Marine veterans with far more experience. His character, in comparison to the renowned Sigismund, who was filled with zeal and fire of a crusader, was as if cast in stone, emotionless and unyielding. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Alexis Polux, born, and like the Imperial Fist Primarch Rogel Dorn, was raised on the frigid ice world of Inuit in the Inuit cluster by a tribal ice caste native to the ice hives of that world. Shortly after the rediscovery of Primarch Rogel Dorn by the Emperor of Mankind during the early years of the Great Crusade, Alexis and his twin brother Helios Polux underwent the rigorous trials as aspirants to become Space Marines of the Imperial Fist Legion. He and his twin brother Helios were both selected as aspirants to the Imperial Fists, but Helios died during one of the final rituals. After having saved Alexis from the attack of a vicious predator, Helios was dangling off the edge of a precipice, which the badly wounded Alexis could not pull him up from. Rather than drag them both down to their deaths, Helios released his grip. Alexis survived the trial and was eventually inducted into the Imperial Fists, but always believed that Helios, the stronger of the two, should have been the one to survive. Some say that this tragedy would cause him to believe that no matter how conscientiously he did his duty, he was never as strong or as qualified for leadership as the most luminous of the Imperial Fist's officers. However, this quality tempered his excellence as a commander with a humility that was lacking in many other Space Marines. Now, during the Great Crusade, Polux rose to the rank of captain and was put in charge of the Imperial Fist's 405th Company. Likewise, he had by the time of the Horus Heresy become one of the Stone Men. His role, like so many others, drastically changed by the betrayal of Horus. Upon hearing about his brother's betrayal, a furious Rogel Dorn sent a detachment he called the Retribution Fleet to Isstvan III. This fleet consisted of 300 companies of the Imperial Fist, totaling a number of 30,000 Astartes, and over 500 warships. It was 30% of the entire 7th Legion, a force powerful enough to subdue 100 worlds. Captain Polux was attached to this mighty force under the command of veteran Captain Yonad, the master of the Retribution Fleet. On the trip to deliver Dorn's wrath, tragedy struck, as the fleet translated back into reality on the edge of the Isstvan system. The power of the warp storm now raging near the system as a result of the will of the dark gods caused the Geller fields to fail as holes sheared into fragments and burned in the fires of their own reactors. Some of the void ships had reached safety, but many died, their courses spat out of the warp to freeze in the void. 200 Imperial Fist warships were lost, their remains left spinning in the light of a forgotten star. In the remains of one of those wrecks, they found Captain Polux. Minus him and a few other survivors found among the wrecks, 10,000 fists were gone. Amongst the lost was the fleet master, Captain Yonad. With his death, the remaining 363 warships, which still represented a fifth of the 7th Legion's full strength, was to be commanded by his designated successor, Captain Polux. Though he was deeply honored, Polux also felt completely alone. The truth was that he did not fear the responsibility of such heavy burden, for Yonad was the 7th Legion's finest fleet master and Captain Polux his best pupil. But he had doubts that he was the best choice, for there were other more experienced, higher in the Legion's rolls of honor, and more skilled at arms. But the Imperial Fists followed form and order to the letter, something not so easily set aside. As such, the Warfleet was to go and establish a base of operations in the Fall system, where, for some unknown reason, the warp was calm. Over the next several weeks, Polux refused the advice of his subordinates to attempt to break out through the warp storms, insisting that they had to conserve their ships and manpower. Also, some instinct may have warned him that the storms were no accident, and the fleet had been lured into some kind of trap. For that reason, he relentlessly drilled his fleet in void combat and ship-to-ship boarding actions. This training paid off, as when the Iron Warriors fleet, led by Perturabo in person, emerged from the warp, the Imperial Fist's fleet was ready for them. With their attacks starting just as they appeared from the warp and the continued annihilation of forces before them, it appeared, at least to the Iron Warriors, that their plan of using their overwhelming numbers and firepower to scatter the surprised and unprepared fleet so that they could destroy them piecemeal was going successfully. A solid strategy when going against the Imperial Fists, who stand their ground and let themselves be torn down like fortresses they were so fond of building. Truthfully, with numbers and firepower that the Imperial Fists were facing, they would have been crushed in a head-on confrontation. Unfortunately for the Iron Warriors, these loyalists were not only ready to meet them, but Polux used an unfixed fortress made of moving strike groups, fading resistance and punishing counterattacks to their foes. Slower battleships drew fire, pulling Iron Warrior ships out of formation, while on the edge of the battlesphere, fast strike groups looped around and through the margins of the Iron Warrior's fleet. They struck again and again, crippling, destroying, and trimming warships from the edge of the enemy fleet like fat carved from meat. The Iron Warrior's fleet was pulling itself apart as it tried to engage the Imperial Fists, and it bled at every turn. The Imperial Fists rallied and began inflicting significant casualties. The Iron Warriors still had greater numbers, but that margin was quickly diminished. While the battle raged on, he was informed by Captain Amandus Tyr that the Iron Warriors' flagship, Iron Blood, was among the attacking fleet. Upon hearing this, Polux made an unexpectedly bold decision that stunned his subordinates, ordering Tyr to assault the battle barge with the detachment of the Retribution fleet and execute Perturabo. Tyr almost achieved his victory, but ultimately fell short. Some say it was Perturabo himself who killed Tyr. Though it failed, the Imperial Fists had still done enough damage to the Iron Warrior's fleet to be able to go on the offensive. But before they could, they received an astropathic message from Terra, bearing Dorn's personal orders to return to Terra at once. Faced with the choice of continuing the battle to its end, or ordering a retreat and allowing his straggling forces to be slaughtered, Polux felt he had no choice but to obey Dorn's orders. The Imperial Fists abruptly left the battle, and jumped into the warp, taking heavy losses from the pursuing Iron Warriors. All said and done, the Iron Warriors won the battle. Despite this, Perturabo took no satisfaction in its income. After all, they had not really won the victory. It was handed to them. In fact, during the first phase of the battle, it had almost been denied to them. And not by Sigismund, who Perturabo had believed was in command, but by a non-entity like Polux. Polux almost died during the last moments of the battle, for his cruiser, the Tribune, was destroyed while engaging the battle barge Contrador. Unfortunately for the Contrador's personnel, Polux and most of his Imperial Fist complement, along with some navigators, teleported to the battle barge before his cruiser exploded. After furious battle, Polux and his men took over the Contrador, and he ordered the navigators they had brought from the Tribune to plot a course to Terra. But, once again, the warp changed Polux's fate. The ruined storm created by the sorcery of Erebus, of the Word Bearers, sucked in his vessels and were scattered around by that gargantuan warp storm. After some time spent in the warp, the navigators reported that they have a lock on what seemed like the Astronomicon. In the end, it turned out to be the beckoning light of the psychic beacon of Satha, the Xenos artifact called the Pharos, which led them to Ultramar. Polux and the remains of his company arrived at Macragge, and were greeted in the audience hall by Robute Guilliman, who claimed that he remembered him. During his debriefing by Guilliman, Polux claimed that he regrets not taking the battle against the Iron Warriors to its victorious end. During his visit on Macragge, employing his immense skills at defensive planning, and of course void warfare, he assisted the newly appointed Ultramarines' first master, Freitas Augustin, in construction of Macragge's defenses. Augustin, from the start, prepared to claim the credit for implementing Polux's suggestions. As Polux continued to review the defenses, he met with loyalist Iron Warriors warsmith Dantiok, and, after Polux overcame his reactionary hatred of the Iron Warriors by finding a common ground between them, they became friends. During one of his daily communication briefings with Captain Polux, Dantiok had detected the presence of the Night Haunter, who had escaped the Dark Angel's invincible reason, and quickly warned the Imperial Fist of his impending attack. Utilizing the communication field of the Pharos, the empathic resonance enabled Dantiok to detect Conrad Kurz in the darkness, and forewarn Polux before each of the renegade Primarch's impending strikes. Then, when his life was in true jeopardy, Dantiok wanted to save him, and so he reached out and took the hand of the fallen Imperial Fist and pulled him through into the massive chamber of Primary Location Alpha on Satha. When both Primarchs Guilliman and Lionel Johnson confronted the Night Haunter a short while later, and their lives too were imperiled, both Polux and Dantiok were able to pull the Primarchs through the Pharos, saving them from certain death. Polux later fought alongside Dantiok against the Night Lord's attack on Satha. The Loyalists were victorious, and Polux survived the battle, but Dantiok was mortally wounded after overloading the Pharos. Dantiok died in the arms of Polux, his former enemy mourning his fallen brother. In the aftermath of the tragic conflict known as the Horus Heresy, Robute Guilliman, the Primarch of the Ultramarines, penned the Codex Astartes. With its creation, the Primarch demanded that his brothers accept his example by dividing their own legions into 1,000-member Space Marine chapters. Initially, Rogel Dorn opposed such a notion. He felt strongly that it was even more crucial for his Space Marines to remain consolidated, so that they could continue to work closely together and protect the Imperium from the remnants of the traitor legions. With rising tension between brothers on the subject, Rogel Dorn realized at this rate another civil war would break out, rather than risking the fragile peace the Imperium had had at this time. He relented and agreed to the second founding. The Imperial Fist created 4 new chapters. The Marines most devoted to their Primarch were to remain Imperial Fists, the most zealous, started the never-ending crusade of the Black Templars, and the most recently initiated and level-headed members, with the exception of its veteran officers, formed the Crimson Fists. The first chapter master of the Crimson Fists was Alexis Polux, a hero of the heresy. The chapter's name derives from the ceremony conducted at the initiation of the new chapter masters in the Imperial Fists Legion. The chapter master and the Primarch would both cut their palm and share blood in a warrior handshake, strengthening the Marine with the blood of the Primarch and forming a symbolic bond between them. Remembered as the Great Father by his brethren, Polux would go on to lead the Crimson Fists for the first 800 standard years of their existence. During this time, Polux reorganized his Battle Brothers in a format that followed closely with the structure prescribed by the Codex Astartes. However, he continued to follow many of the tactics and traditions that he had learned at the side of his Primarch as a member of the Imperial Fists. For this reason, the Crimson Fists remain experts at defensive actions, just like their progenitors. The chapter continued the tradition of permitting a single warrior to assume the heraldry and status of the Emperor's champion prior to entering a major conflict. But this practice was only invoked upon rare occasions. Similarly, the Crimson Fists are one of the 12 successor chapters of the 7th Legion that participates in the Feast of Blades, alongside the Imperial Fists. After the founding, only one notable campaign, known as the Scourging of Urlik Prime, is really mentioned as being led by Polux. Fought in M31, it was the Crimson Fist's very first large-scale martial action as a chapter. This campaign was to liberate the Imperial colony on the world of Urlik Prime. The colonists had come under attack from several fast-moving tribes of the Eldari Exodites, who were determined to eradicate every last human on the face of the planet. The campaign was a great success. Even more so, his masterful and stoic defense of the colony serves to this day as a tangible example to new initiates of the chapter. Polux finally fell 8 centuries after the founding of the Crimson Fist during a battle for an unnamed star system, codified as HR 8518. The system was occupied by a previously unknown alien species, later referred to as the Scythians. These deviant Xenos warrior monks made war with terrible venom-based weapons. He was struck by a poisoned projectile from such a weapon. It is said he fought the deadly poison for many days before his transhuman physiology was finally overcome. Yet even as he was dying, this remarkable man drew up and imparted a plan to boot the Scythians from HR 8518. After Polux's death, the Crimson Fist, utilizing his plan, engaged the aliens in a short but extremely bloody campaign of xenocide, from which the Scythians learned the true power of the Imperium. Well, I hope you enjoyed this short box. Next week, I shall discuss a chapter known as The Dark Hunters. If you guys have any minor chapters you'd like me to discuss in the future, please leave it in the comments, and don't forget, please follow, like, comment, subscribe, or become one of our merry band and join our membership program. Have a great day, and as always, until next time, this is Yuksen, signing off.